The Unsolved Mystery of D.B. Cooper, America's Most Daring Skyjacker, on November 24, 1971. A seemingly ordinary flight from Portland to Seattle turned into one of the most intriguing mysteries in aviation history. This was the day when a man, later known as D.B. Cooper, hijacked a commercial airliner, extorted a hefty ransom, and vanished without a trace, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions that continue to baffle the FBI even 5 decades later. It all began when a middle-aged man dressed in a business suit, wearing sunglasses, approached the counter of Northwest Orient Airlines at Portland International Airport. He identified himself as Don Cooper and paid cash for a one-way ticket to Seattle. Carrying only a briefcase, he appeared calm and composed, blending in perfectly with other travelers. At that time, air travel security was almost non-existent. There were no stringent security checks, no extra scans, and certainly no ID verifications. Anyone could walk onto a plane with minimal scrutiny. Cooper boarded the Boeing 727 aircraft without raising any suspicion. He took a seat at the rear of the plane, seat 18C, ordered a bourbon and soda, and lit a cigarette, which was still allowed on flights back in the early 1970s. Shortly after takeoff, at approximately 2:58 p.m., Cooper handed a note to a nearby flight attendant named Florence Shaw. Assuming it was just another passenger trying to flirt, she tucked the note into her pocket without reading it. Cooper leaned in and whispered, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." Startled, Schaffner opened the note. Written in neat block letters was a chilling message. "I have a bomb in my briefcase. I want you to sit beside me." With her heart racing, she followed his instructions and sat down. Cooper opened his briefcase slightly to reveal a glimpse of red sticks, what appeared to be dynamite, and a battery with wires. The hijacking had begun. Cooper's demands were straightforward but serious. He wanted $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck standing by at Seattle-Tacoma Airport to refuel the aircraft for a getaway. He made it clear, if his demands weren't met, he would blow up the plane. There were 36 passengers on board, along with 6 crew members. Remarkably, the passengers remained unaware of the hijacking for most of the flight. The flight crew relayed Cooper's demands to air traffic control, and the authorities, including the FBI and local law enforcement, quickly began coordinating a response. Since it was the first ransom-motivated hijacking in U.S. history, officials decided to comply fully with the hijacker to ensure the safety of the passengers and crew. The plane circled Seattle for nearly 2 hours as authorities scrambled to gather the ransom money and parachutes. Meanwhile, Cooper remained calm and polite. He allowed the passengers to be served food and drinks. He even paid for his bourbon. Finally, at 5:39 p.m., the plane landed in Seattle. True to the hijacker's demands, a bank representative brought the ransom day's dollars 20 bills with recorded serial numbers, along with 4 parachutes. Cooper examined the items briefly and then released all 36 passengers, along with 2 flight attendants. Only the pilots and 1 flight attendant, Tina Mucklow, remained on board. With the money and parachutes in his possession, Cooper instructed the crew to take off again. His new destination, Mexico City. He specified the flight plan in great detail. The aircraft was to fly at a low altitude of 10,000 feet, at a slow speed of 170 knots, with the landing gear down and the rear stairway deployed. He wanted the flaps set at 15 degrees and instructed that the cabin remain These were highly unusual instructions, but the pilots complied. Cooper chose the Boeing 727 aircraft for a very specific reason. It was one of the few commercial planes that had a rear stairway, which could be lowered mid-flight. Around 8 p.m., as the plane flew over the rugged, forested terrain of southwestern Washington, Cooper carried out his daring escape. He ordered the remaining crew members into the cockpit and closed the door behind them. Then, somewhere between Seattle and Reno, in the darkness and amidst heavy rain, Cooper lowered the rear staircase and jumped out of the plane with a parachute, the money strapped to his body, and into the night. When the plane finally landed safely in Reno, Nevada, the authorities stormed aboard, only to find the cabin empty. Cooper was gone. A massive manhunt ensued. FBI agents, local police, and even military personnel scoured the dense wilderness where they believed Cooper might have landed. Using flight data, weather conditions, and the aircraft's speed and trajectory, investigators mapped out a likely drop zone, a 45-square-kilometer area near the Lewis River in southwestern Washington, surrounded by thick forests and mountainous terrain. Search teams combed the area for weeks, but found no trace of Cooper, his briefcase, the parachutes, or the ransom money. What they did find on the plane were a few clues. A black tie left on Cooper's seat, a mother-of-pearl tie clip, and 8 filter-tipped Raleigh cigarette butts. Unfortunately, in 1971, forensic technology was limited. There were no usable fingerprints, and DNA testing did not exist. The FBI launched an extensive investigation, codenamed an ORJI. They interviewed hundreds of suspects, pursued countless leads, and examined every possible angle. Over the years, the list of suspects ballooned to over 800 individuals, including ex-military personnel, skydivers, and even convicted criminals. Despite their efforts, the trail went cold. The only breakthrough came nearly a decade later. In February 1980, an 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram was vacationing with his family along the Columbia River at a place called Tennebar, not far from Vancouver, Washington. This discovery reignited interest in the case, but also deepened the mystery. How did the money end up buried along the riverbank, 27 kilometers from the estimated jump site? Some theorized that the money had been buried intentionally by Cooper or someone connected to him, possibly as a red herring. Others believed the bills had washed downstream, though experts pointed out that the currents didn't match this theory. Oddly, the sand above the buried money was dated to be from 1974, suggesting that cash had been deposited there at least 3 years after the hijacking. More questions than answers. In the years that followed, the FBI continued to receive tips and examine new evidence. A partial DNA profile was eventually extracted from Cooper's tie, but it was incorrect. Some amateur sleuths believed Cooper had died during the jump. Unable to survive the harsh terrain and weather conditions, others were convinced he had lived, possibly hiding in plain sight, having assumed a new identity and quietly lived out his days with or without the money. Several suspects gained media attention. One of the most notable was Richard Floyd McCoy, a former Army Green Beret who hijacked a plane in 1972 under eerily similar circumstances. He escaped with $500,000 but was later caught, imprisoned, and eventually killed during an attempted escape. Though some believe McCoy was Cooper, the FBI ultimately ruled him out, based on physical differences and conflicting time. In 2016, after 45 years of investigation, the FBI officially closed the D.B. Cooper case, having failed to conclusively identify the hijacker or recover the bulk of the money. It remains the only unsolved skyjacking in American history. Today, the legend of D.B. Cooper continues to capture the public's imagination. His mysterious disappearance has inspired books, documentaries, movies, and even fan conventions. The FBI's website still hosts details about the case, and the sketches of the dark-suited man with sunglasses remain iconic symbols of America as greatest unsolved crime. Who was D.B. Cooper? Was he a seasoned paratrooper, a disgruntled war veteran, or just an ordinary man with extraordinary daring? Did he die in the wilderness, or did he outwit the FBI and disappear forever into the crowd? No one knows for sure. What remains is a story, part crime, part legend, of a man who pulled off the impossible and vanished into thin air.